What drives a nation to resurrect an ancient empire and claim an entire sea as its own? For Benito Mussolini, this was not a rhetorical question, but the very essence of his foreign policy, a grand and aggressive vision designed to forge Italy into a major European power. He promised to revive the nation's status as a great power, to carve out a new Roman Empire from the lands of Africa and the Mediterranean. This ambition was not merely political, it was a deeply ideological crusade rooted in the fascist doctrine of Spazio Vitale, a concept meaning living space, which demanded the expansion of Italian territorial control and national prestige. In the powerful propaganda of the era, the fascist government reached back into antiquity, reviving the Roman term Mare Nostrum, which is Latin for our sea, to refer to the Mediterranean. This was a clear and audacious declaration of intent. Italy, under his rule, would dominate these historic waters, and the world would be forced to take notice. Historians generally agree that during this tumultuous period, Italian foreign policy was the personal project of Mussolini himself. While his early years in power may have shown some restraint, a distinct shift occurred from the mid-1930s when his approach became more overtly and unapologetically fascist. This new direction was characterized by a glorification of war for its own sake, a relentless pursuit of imperial expansion, and a decisive turn away from the established norms of diplomacy and international cooperation. This ideological fervor culminated in the fourth phase of the fascist regime, a period stretching from 1935 to 1940, which was defined by an increasingly aggressive and reckless foreign policy. It was an era that witnessed the launch of the Second Italo-Ethiopian War from the Italian colonies of Eritrea and Somaliland, a direct confrontation with the League of Nations that resulted in punitive sanctions, a turn towards growing economic self-sufficiency, known as autarky, the brazen invasion of Albania, and finally, the fateful signing of the Pact of Steel with Nazi Germany. The first major act in this dramatic unfolding of imperial ambition was the invasion of Abyssinia, the nation known today as Ethiopia, in 1935. This was a land that had, until then, successfully resisted European colonization. Mussolini's objectives originated in the longer-term Italian nationalist dream of building a vast empire, a desire to stand as an equal to the great imperial powers of Britain and France. Yet the aim of invading Ethiopia was also deeply personal and symbolic, a mission to boost Italian national prestige which had been profoundly wounded decades earlier. In the 19th century, Italian forces had suffered a humiliating defeat at the hands of Ethiopian forces at the Battle of Adowa in 1896, a shocking event that had thwarted Italy's first attempt at colonization and preserved Ethiopia's independence. For the fascists, this historical slight was a stain that could only be cleansed with overwhelming force and total conquest. What followed was not a simple military campaign, but a brutal and merciless war of colonial subjugation. Ignoring all international conventions, the Italian military unleashed its modern weaponry upon the Ethiopian people, dropping tons of poisonous gas bombs from the air onto soldiers and civilians alike. The world watched in horror, and the League of Nations issued protests and condemnations, but Mussolini remained defiant. He proclaimed the birth of a new Italian empire in East Africa, a territory comprising the newly conquered Ethiopia, alongside the pre-existing Italian colonies of Somaliland and Eritrea. The conquest, while condemned abroad, was a resounding success at home. It led to a powerful surge of nationalist feeling across Italy, intoxicating the public and emboldening the dictator. This victory, won in defiance of the international community, did not satisfy Mussolini's appetite for expansion, but instead encouraged him to pursue even greater and more audacious acts of aggression. With his African empire secured, Mussolini turned his sights back toward Europe. In the early months of 1939, while the world's attention was fixated on Adolf Hitler's flagrant violation of the Munich Agreement and occupation of parts of Czechoslovakia, the Italian dictator saw an opportunity. He directed his focus to the small kingdom of Albania, a nation strategically positioned across the Adriatic Sea. On the 7th of April, 1939, Italian forces invaded, swiftly overwhelming the small country's defenses and taking firm control. This calculated act of aggression further destabilized the European continent, but it was the next step that would irrevocably tie Italy's fate to that of Nazi Germany. In May of 1939, Mussolini entered into a formal military alliance with Hitler, a pact ominously named the Pact of Steel. This agreement fundamentally altered Italy's position, binding it to Germany's strategic aims and drastically reducing Mussolini's own scope for independent maneuver. Despite the aggressive posturing in the formal alliance, Italy hesitated as Europe plunged into war. It was only in June of 1940, with the stunning collapse of France seemingly imminent and the Second World War appearing to be all but over, that Mussolini made his final, fateful decision. Believing he could achieve his territorial ambitions with minimal risk, he declared war and joined the conflict on Germany's side. His immediate war aim was clear and consistent with his long-held imperial vision: to expand the Italian colonies in North Africa by seizing vast tracts of land from the beleaguered British and French colonies. It was a gambler's move, an opportunistic leap into a global conflict, driven by the same relentless desire for a new Roman Empire that had led his armies into the heart of Ethiopia just a few years earlier. This final act, born from a dream of imperial glory, would ultimately lead his nation not to the promised greatness of Mare Nostrum, but into the heart of a devastating war that would consume his regime and shatter his ambitions forever.
Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and comment below with your thoughts or what you'd like to see next.